For this first lab, the main goal is to download and install Python. Inside Canvas, under the course syllabus or course information module, there is a page called Downloading and Installing Python. This gives you the directions on how to get Pycharm installed. You do need to download and install Python. Python is the programming language itself. And I suggest some version of Python 3. If you click this link here, it will take you to Python 3.9.6, which is more than adequate. If for some reason you don't want this version, you don't necessarily have to pick this version, but this is my suggestion. If you are a Windows user, you need to click the Windows Installer 60-bit version, 64-bit. For Mac OS with Apple Silicon, you need to click Mac OS 64-bit version or Universal Installer 2. If you are running an older Mac, then you need to pick Mac OS 64-bit Intel installer. So depending on your Mac computer, make sure you pick this correctly. It says that Python 3.9.6 is experimental. However, that is the version that you want. The Apple Silicon is still pretty new. After downloading and installing Python, double-click the installer and follow the directions. After downloading and installing Python, you need to download and install Pycharm. So Pycharm is the IDE, it's the integrated development environment where you will actually be writing your Python code. You do not have to use Pycharm. That is my recommendation. I think it's fantastic software. From what I've talked to the TAs, they're fans of it also. As long as you can write Python code on your computer and download a Python file, you will probably be fine with whatever software toolchain you want to work. Python files end in a .py file extension. If you decide to not use Pycharm, that is okay as long as you can complete the assignments. However, I do think you should work on getting familiar with Pycharm because, as I've said, it is fantastic software. You can find Pycharm by clicking this link. Pycharm is made by a company called JetBrains. You can get to their software to download Pycharm by clicking this link. They do have two separate versions. They have a community edition, which is free, and they have a paid-for edition. I don't remember what it's called, but it is free for students. There is no reason that you should have to need the paid-for edition. I think it's called the professional edition. Just get the community edition for the purposes of this course. Once you have installed both Python and Pycharm, open Pycharm, create a new project, and in Lab, the TAs can help you from there. But I'm going to open a Pycharm window. Okay, here I have clicked New Project to create a new Pycharm project. This is where your project is going to be located. So my project is going to be located in my users folder under my NetID. It's going to be located in the Pycharm projects. And then this is whatever the project is going to be called. So let's call this new CSE 1284. Click Python interpreter. So the interpreter is the Python language that is going to be running your code. You are generally best considered to use a virtual environment. This is the location of where the interpreter is going to be located. So notice that it is in the same location. It is just under this folder named VENV, Virtual Environment. You need to pick a base interpreter. Your base interpreter is going to be the version of Python that you just recently downloaded. These options don't matter. And if you pick the new environment, then you wouldn't click the previously configured interpreter. So click New Environment using Virtual Environment, set the location, select your base interpreter, and then give your project a new name and click Create. Okay, so here we have our new Pycharm project. And if we right click over here on the left hand side of the screen, we can click New Python File. And let's call this Lab01. And since we told it was a Python file, we don't have to give it the .py extension. It's going to do that for us. So it created a Python file. There is no need to create a separate Pycharm project for every lab assignment. You can, but I would suggest creating directories. So right click on New, create a new directory, and let's call this one Labs. And you can create a separate directory for the various files you're creating. So for next week's lab, you could create a new file called Lab2. And you can keep all of your lab assignments under the directory Labs. If you want to have a chapter for notes, create a directory for notes. And then here you can create a Python file with what you learned from chapter 1. So here you can have comments about chapter 1. You can have code corresponding to what you learned. In chapter 1. And then you can keep adding Python notes. There's no reason to have more than one Pycharm project. You're navigating this class with one Pycharm project will probably be easier than navigating it with multiple Pycharm projects. Just create separate directories, separate folders to help keep your code organized. So let's go back to this week's lab. Let's have a comment with my name. Let's create a comment for the title of the lab. Let's add the due date. Whenever it's due, I don't know when it's due. 2/1. So 2/8/29. It'll be due somewhere around there. I don't know the due date off the top of my head. And then let's do some dummy code. So this assignment is not going to be related to the Pythagorean theorem, but let's say that it is. So the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if we get input for a and b, so a equals that, and b equals the same thing, so let's print out those two values. So now there's a green triangle up here in the top right. It is not green, it is grayed out. If we right click, it will say run Lab 1, there's a green triangle there, and it runs the code, so it's waiting on input. So let's say that A is 3, B is 4, and we get our print statement. But now I want you to notice that this triangle up here in the top right is now green. So rather than having to right click in the future, we can just click this. And if we do 4, 3, our print statement reflects that we entered those numbers in backwards. So now, let's say that C equals A plus B raised to the 0.5 power. Raising something to the 0.15 power is mathematically the same as doing the square root. And then let's add a print statement. Print the hypotenuse of a triangle, of a right triangle with side with leg lengths of A and B is C. That's a lot to go on one line. So here's our print statement. The hypotenuse of a right triangle with leg lengths of. So this is one thing that we are printing. This is a separate thing that we are printing, a third thing, fourth thing, fifth thing, sixth things. When we offset things with commas in print statements, it prints the multiple things with a space in between. So since there's a space in between, we don't need this space. And we don't need that space. All right, so let's run this. Let's say 3 and 4 are our leg lengths. The hypotenuse of a right triangle with leg lengths of 3 and 4 is wrong. Okay. This should be A squared plus B squared. Let's run it again. 3, 4. That is right. Let's run it again. What's it? 8 and 10. Nope. Maybe it's 6 and 8. I think it's 6 and 8. 6 and 8 has a hypotenuse of length 10. Okay, so now that you have your programming assignment done, which this week's lab is not on the Pythagorean theorem, but if it were, go to your project window, which is this area over here, navigate to the lab, right-click on it, and then for Mac it says Open in Finder. For Windows, I believe it says Open in File Explorer or something like that. And when you click that, it takes you to your File Explorer system. So on Mac, that's called Finder. And this is the lab that you need to upload to zyBooks. This is the file that you need to upload in zyBooks. Notice that it has a .py extension.